What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video. Today, I'm going to be putting myself in the shoes of Ryan Poles, and we're going to be doing an offseason rundown here for the Chicago Bears. Now, before any of you guys scramble to the comment section saying, what are you doing? You're a Minnesota Vikings fan, trying to do an offseason for the Bears. You're going to try and sabotage, and you're not going to do the right things. Look, the fact of the matter is, okay, it doesn't matter who I'm a fan of, okay? What I choose to do here is irrelevant to what actually happens in real life. I'm really just here to put together a good video, regardless of who I root for, on a regular basis on Sundays. So, if it really bothers you guys that much, then I'm sorry for you. But here, I'm just trying to put together the best offseason if I was in Ryan Poles' shoes. So, what we're going to do first is we're going to just do an evaluation, a rundown of this roster. We'll get into how we're going to manage the salary cap, who we're going to cut, who are we going to sign, and then also jump into a mock draft later on into this video. And this is going to be such an intriguing offseason for the Chicago Bears just because of how much resources they currently have, the young players that they have on the roster, and the entire draft capital that they have as well. So there's going to be a lot of interesting moves and decisions being made this offseason. So starting off here at the top, Justin Fields, really took strides this year. And when we go back to that 2021 draft class, right, 5 guys taken in the first round, Justin Fields was my number 2 quarterback in the NFL draft heading into that NFL draft. And as a Vikings fan, I wanted him. I was very disappointed to see him go to Chicago, but nonetheless, that's where he ended up anyway. And it's been a struggle the first few years, but really took some strides this year, and you can really see that his game took a jump this past season. And of course, right, the biggest thing to his game, his ability to run the ball. He has breakaway speed, a lot of speed that many other quarterbacks in the league cannot say that they possess. So, that's what's so intriguing about Justin Fields, is that he has that athleticism, he has the talent, and we just haven't seen him really put it together 3 years into the NFL. But despite that, there is still a good chance that he will be the quarterback for the Chicago Bears. Now, this running back duo that we have here, this is exactly what you want in today's NFL. You have 2 solid running backs that you're not paying a ton of money, right? Khalil Herbert, I think, very underrated. If he wasn't hurt this season, I think would have caught more attention, obviously would have got more reps, and his production would have been more respectable. But, as a Chicago Bears fan, you're probably hoping he stays healthier next season, and him and Roshan can really split that backfield. DJ Moore has been a fantastic addition. I think is a huge reason why we saw progression from Justin Fields' game this past season. So this was a brilliant move there by the Chicago Bears, and that trade as a whole just looks fantastic now, considering you have the number 1 pick because of that. So just wins the more you look into the trade. Now, Darnell Mooney is a guy who is going to be a free agent this year, so we'll get into his future with the Bears in a little bit. Tyler Scott, I think that's a guy where you want him to get those wide receiver 3 snaps, right? Still a super young guy out of Cincinnati, so I think that there is some potential there, and you don't want to hinder it by getting too much depth and talent at the position to the point where he can't really play. So we're going to explore a scenario here where we can get Tyler Scott somewhat significant snaps from the slot as a wide receiver 3. Cole Kmet, very solid tight end. You guys know how it is. Braxton Jones, I feel like, is a very underrated tackle, right? And you get him late in the draft a couple years ago. He's been a really solid addition to an offensive line that desperately needed help at that time. So he has been a very pleasant surprise. Tevin Jenkins, I think, also took a really big leap this year, especially in the run game, right? He was super effective in that aspect of the game. So I like this young offensive line that's being put together right now. Center, obviously a big hole. Not a super huge fan of Lucas Patrick, neither with Dan Feeney, right? Feeney's a guy who just kind of rotates through that interior of the offensive line, so we're definitely going to look to address that center position. Nate Davis, good signing right there. He's going to continue to be the right guard. And then Darnell Wright, this is a guy that I was very, very high on heading into the 2023 draft last year, and obviously had a very rough rookie campaign, but we're not going to give up on him just yet. It would be way too early, and the guy is way too talented. And so I expect him to progress heading to this upcoming season. Is definitely the worst out of the young group of offensive linemen, disregarding the center, of course. But I still think that there is a lot of time, a lot of talent still in Darnell Wright. So really, we're in a situation right now where we have a lot of young guys who still have a lot of untapped potential on this offensive side of the ball. And it's going to be exciting to see what kind of pieces we can add to really elevate this team, because I think with time, with more experience, and with the proper coaching, of course, I think that this team has enough talent to win some games. Okay, moving on here to this Matt Eberflus defense. You guys can let me know in the comment section whether you guys like that you're keeping him as a coach, or if you would rather see them go in a different direction. But it is what it is. DeMarcus Walker is a guy who is a free agent this year, so we will talk about him. Justin Jones as well. Andrew Billings, he'll most likely be on the team. And what's interesting to me is you have two very young defensive tackles in Gervon Dexter and Zach Pickens that you got in the middle of the rounds last year. And so do the Chicago Bears want to explore a scenario where they get some snaps this season, whether it be Dexter or Pickens? I don't think it's going to be possible to get both of them. It's going to be something we're going to talk about later on in this video. Montez Sweat has been a fantastic addition to this team. I mean, you could argue that he is the best defensive player on this team, and there are a lot of guys who, are making names for themselves, right? I mean, Tremaine Edmonds, I think, has been a fantastic addition. Jalen Johnson really took a leap this year, right? The biggest thing with him was just staying healthy. You knew the talent was always there from when he was drafted back in 2019, I believe. But him really putting together a healthy and productive season is going to earn him some money, whether it's from Chicago or from another team. We'll get into that as well. And Jaquan Brisker is another one of those young players that I really like. Look, they hit it on the head signing these two linebackers in Edwards and Edmonds. Sanborn has been good as that other rotational linebacker. And then, Gordon, Stevenson, these are two very young corners that are not top-notch guys, but they're serviceable, right? I mean, they're not good, they're not bad. But again, young, still a lot of time to improve. And so we're going to rock with those guys. Spoiler alert. But this secondary as a whole, very young, and there is a lot to be excited about. And then we got a good old special teams crew right here. Cairo Santos is pretty good. But overall, right, to generalize this roster as a whole, I think it's a young roster that has a lot of talent that hasn't been fully explored yet. And so we're going to take all of those things into consideration as we go through this offseason process. So the first thing that we're going to do here is we're going to take a look at the salary cap. This is the 2024 salary cap situation. Let me adjust my face cam right here so you can see here in 2024, the Bears have $48.5 million in cap space. And so we're definitely going to want to make some moves in order to maneuver the cap space, manipulate it a little bit so we can get some big name guys in free agency. So I have a list here of things I want to do. So if I'm looking down, that's what it is. Look, the first thing that we want to do here is make money by restructuring contracts. There aren't a ton of bad contracts on this team as I was looking through it. And so that's a really, really good thing here for the Chicago Bears. They're set up well for the future. And what we want to do when we restructure these contracts, if you don't know what it is, we'll go over it really quickly, is basically you're creating more money for now, but at the same time, you're also pushing a lot of money towards the back end of that contract. And so even though it gets you money for this specific year, there's going to be times down the road where these guys are getting paid a little bit more. And that's typically why you only see guys who are going to be with the team long term get that restructure. So that's exactly what we're going to do, right? Three guys that I want to restructure. First, Tremaine Edmonds. We're going to restructure his contract, and that's going to get us an additional $12.5 million in cap space right there. So you can see the numbers adjusted at the top right corner. Again, we're going to restructure another guy in DJ Moore here. He's going to be a Bear for the long term. We get $7.5 million roughly here with that restructuring. And then we're also going to restructure Cole Kmet as well. And from him, we are going to get about $6.5 million in cap space. So just like that, with those three restructures alone, $75 million in cap space from the original 48 that we had. And you look at 2025, right, we still have $108 million to work with. So we're not putting ourselves behind the eight ball by any means next season. And I think we've set ourselves up well for this free agency period this year. And then one more move that I wanted to make. We're going to just cut DeMarcus Walker over here, right? You can see we are going to have to take on about $4 million in dead cap, but we will also relieve $4.5 million in the cap space. And so that gets us an extra $79 million. So we're close to $80 million in cap space this year just off of those four moves alone. And so that's really what I wanted to do. And it's crazy to think we could get even more money if we restructure the contract of Montez Sweat. But because we just give him that extension, and we don't really need that money, I don't want to touch that contract where we could possibly restructure him later on in his tenure here in Chicago. So this is a great start, right? Just making those internal moves for the time being. Now, as we move on, this is the list of free agents here in 2024 for the Chicago Bears. So we'll go over most of the main players. We'll just speed run through a lot of the other insignificant players, in my opinion. So starting off here, right, with Yannick Ngakoue, and I'm sorry, my nose, I don't know what's going on right now. I feel like I'm going to sneeze and it's not coming out. So Yannick Ngakoue, right, this is a guy you signed for $10.5 million early on in the year. I just don't see him re-signing, right? Only played 55% of the snaps and not extremely productive. And I believe even on this depth chart here, he's listed as like the fourth guy because he was on IR. So I just don't see the Bears re-signing a guy who was hurt and, is getting up there in age, almost near 30. So we won't bring him back. Now, this is an interesting one, right? We talked about the depth at the interior defensive line because, even without Jones, who's an impending free agent, you have Billings, you have Pickens, you have Dexter. We are not going to bring back Justin Jones here in this situation. And I thought about it. This is your most productive interior defensive lineman, but trust me, we have a plan in place. We are not going to sign back Justin Jones. Lucas Patrick and Dan Feeney, our two centers, will not be returning just because of age, and they're average at best. So I don't want them back. Tanyan will not be coming back. Green, Foreman, Lewis, all of those aging vets, don't want them back as well. Now look, these guys and signing these type of players is going to be important, right? Because depth is extremely important. And so we're not going that deep into this offseason rundown. The Bears are going to go out and make those depth signings as the free agency period goes along. But we're here to talk about the big money-making moves, that are going to translate to wins ultimately at the end of the day. Now, one that will translate to wins right here is if we sign back Jalen Johnson. I know Bears fans would be disappointed as heck if Jalen Johnson did not return, into the navy and orange. And so we're going to bring him back. And just looking at the contracts, right, for cornerbacks in the current NFL. And look, he's 25 years old. He is right in the prime of his career. I want to sign him back to a 3-year, $60 million deal. So his average per year, $20 million. I think that that's a fair price. I mean, this is a guy who gave up a 50% completion percentage when thrown at, 4 interceptions, and has proven to this team that he can be healthy and is truly an X factor on this team when he is playing. He's a pivotal part to the success of this defense, and it's not often you get a young, talented cornerback like this, so you have to bring him back. So again, 3 years, $60 million. I will be updating you guys with the numbers as we move on. So that is definitely number one priority and who we wanted to bring back. We get him back here, staying as our number one corner. Patrick Scales, we're going to bring him back. $900,000 deal for a year. Guys, the long snappers are important too, okay? You take them for granted. They mess up one snap and then you get mad at them, but for the most part, they're perfect. So we're going to keep Scales here. We're going to re-sign him. St. Brown, he's not his brother. We're not bringing him back. And then Cole, Taylor, Peterman, Johnson, depth players again. They will find guys that they like. Maybe it's some of these guys. Maybe they go out in free agency and look elsewhere, but we're not going to focus too much on that. Darnell Mooney, that's an interesting one. Look, in my opinion, I don't think that this would be a guy that we want to bring back, especially because of how much draft capital we have and how much talent is in this wide receiver class. I think we will come across a good wide receiver in this class, and I think that that is probably the better move than re-signing a guy who had 40 catches, 400 yards. I understand, right, going through a little bit of injury, but all of those aspects need to be taken into account, and I just don't feel like he's ever going to break out into that player that some people thought he might, and I think we know where his ceiling is at, and so I just don't feel comfortable bringing him back, even as a 27-year-old. So I won't do that. No Joe Reed, no Josh Blackwell. So really our two signings here at the end of the day, Jalen Johnson, right, for that $20 million on average contract for 3 years, and then we also bring back Patrick Scales, the long snapper. So originally, right, we go back here, we had 79.5, right, $80 million, and we're going to take away roughly about $21 million. I know that there's a lot more detail that goes into these contracts, and it's not necessarily like, okay, we're taking away this much because that's how much he makes on average. I understand that, but this is a rough estimate of what the cap space would look like after these type of signings. So we are left with $58.5 million heading into free agency now after taking care of all of our in-house responsibilities. So $58.5 million. Now, obviously, letting a lot of guys go, there are some glaring needs on this team. So let's get into the guys that we want to sign, okay? So first of all, we need a defensive lineman, in my opinion, whether that is an edge rusher or an interior defensive lineman. And look, here's the thing. There are some guys out here in the edge rusher group that I really, really like. Obviously, being a Vikings fan, Danielle Hunter has shown that he can be extremely productive, extremely versatile. This would be an interesting signing, right? Same goes for guys like Chase Young, Leonard Floyd, Josh Allen, even one of the Panthers right here. Why am I blanking out? Brian Burns right over here. There's a lot of good edge rushers, but we are paying, right, Montez Sweat a lot of money. Now, that's not to say that we can't pay 2 premier edge rushers because that would be huge, right? But there is a position that I think it is much harder, right, to get a premier player at the spot. And if you have the opportunity to get him or get a guy like that, I think you have to get him. We're going to focus on the interior defensive line here. And who we're going to go with here, okay, is this big boy down here, Christian Wilkins out of Miami. So there's a lot of guys like Chris Jones, and I just feel like Chris Jones, there always seems to be some sort of problem with his contract and stuff. We don't need that right now, right? Leonard Williams, not feeling it too much. DJ Reader's a great player, but he's coming off of an ACL injury. And so what I want to do here is I really want to make an emphasis to try and get Christian Wilkins, right? This is a young player. I don't know why it's saying he's 29. I don't think that's right, but here, let's click on him real quick. Maybe the information is wrong on here. Look, regardless, okay, he's going to be one hell of a player, and he'll be playing with us for a long time if we sign him. And so, extremely productive, hasn't been paid a ton because he's still on his rookie deal. And I guess it is right. He was drafted, as a 24-year-old. So what we'll do here is we are going to sign Christian Wilkins to a chunky deal. No pun intended, because I know he's a big guy. And what we're going to do here is we're going to sign him to an $88 million deal over 4 years. So on average, $22 million a year, making him one of the highest paid interior defensive linemen in the game. And look, what's so important about having guys like this, right, is that, he's going to be productive, right? Had an extremely productive past 2 seasons with the Dolphins. I just don't know if they're going to be able to pay him because of their current money situation. And so this is a realistic option here. But if you have Montez Sweat, right, just eating things up on the outside, and you have a guy who can produce pressure from the inside as well in Christian Wilkins and also be an effective run stopper, you already have good linebackers in the back. This only makes things easier for everyone in the back 7 of that defense, right? So, me personally, I'm a huge fan of Christian Wilkins. I think he just has fine-tuned every single part of his game and is a premier interior defensive lineman. And the reason why I'm going to go in this direction is that there aren't a lot of top-rated, projected interior defensive linemen aside from Jerzon Newton out of Illinois, which you guys might be familiar with because of the same state situation we have going on here. But I think that there's a lot more edge rushers that we could pick up in the draft, so we don't have to allocate that money to that position. And so I know we talked about potentially letting the young guys play, right? Gervon Dexter and Zach Pickens. But you have a guy like Christian Wilkins. I cannot emphasize how much of a luxury it is to have a guy who can not just be an effective run stopper, but create pressure from the inside as well. And so that's exactly what we're doing. We're making an emphasis on building the D-line with the capital and resources that we have. We're bringing in Christian Wilkins on a 4-year, $88 million deal. Now, next, we want to continue building through the trenches. We talked about how one of the glaring holes in this offensive line was the center position, right? So what we're going to do here is we're going to get one of the top-rated free agents at the position. We're going to go with Connor Williams. Now, if you're not familiar with Connor Williams, one of the highest-graded centers and offensive linemen in general in PFF, right? Had a 90-plus grade, only gave up 1 sack this year. And so this is a really, really effective player. And like I said, the Dolphins, they're this team that they have a lot of guys that they want to re-sign in the near future, right? You have guys like Jalen Phillips, Javon Holland, Jalen Waddle, Tua Tagovailoa. They can't pay everyone. And so it is very realistic to see these guys hit the open market. And, a team like the Bears should poach on these guys right here. So we're going to try and get Connor Williams here and sign him to a 3-year, $36 million deal. Again, these guys are going to want money, right? And it's understandable. These are highly productive players who are going to be instant starters, instant impact players on this team. You're going to see the difference immediately. And I would be more than happy to have this guy solidify that offensive line and be that key piece to really put everything together at that center spot. So we have 2 big money signings here. And then we have one more signing that isn't as significant, but just for security purposes, because again, we're going to be heading into a mock draft right after this. And it might not go as we expect it to. So we have to just have an insurance plan just in case. Taking a look at this edge rusher spot that we just talked about, we're not going to get any of those big name guys because we just spent a ton of money on 2 premier players in the trenches. And what I want to go ahead and do here is pick up a guy like Dante Fowler. This is more of a value signing right here, a veteran presence, a guy that can still bring you some level of production, whether he comes in because of injury or he comes in as a rotational piece. 5 sacks this year, very solid for that Cowboys defense, and so we'll bring him in on a 1-year, $3 million deal with little to no guarantees, and so there is no risk bringing in a guy like this. And so when it's all said and done, we had that $58.5 million that we started off free agency with, and we spent about $37 million of it when you put the numbers together on the average per year, right? You have that $22 million a year with Christian Wilkins, $12 million a year with Connor Williams, and then $3 million a year with Dante Fowler, right? The $37 million, and so that leaves us with $21.5 million left in cap space as this offseason finishes, this free agency period. And so I feel like we got a couple good players here, and it's really setting us up to finish the rest of this roster here with this 2024 NFL draft. So we still have that $21.5 million to roll over to next season to potentially make another midseason trade and sign another big name guy. You never know, but it's good to have that cap space to work with, to be flexible throughout the season, because so many transactions happen. Things add up, things come up, you might have to sign a guy, and so it's good to have that luxury of having that $21.5 million in cap space. So as we head into the 2024 NFL draft, I still think we need to make an emphasis at wide receiver, right? Because right now Tyler Scott is our wide receiver too, and we talked about how much depth is at that wide receiver spot in this draft, so we're going to take a look at that. Aside from that, I feel like our offense is pretty damn good. We move on to the defensive side of the ball, right? New starter, Christian Wilkins will be the number 1 interior defensive lineman, along with Dante Fowler taking over as one of the starters for the edge rusher position. And aside from that, it really stays the same. Jalen Johnson, we bring him back. And so, in a sense, we have the luxury of picking best player available in a lot of these spots. And so, without further ado, let's head into the 2024 NFL draft right here now. This right here is NFL Draft Buzz. This is what I'm using to do the mock draft simulator, because it allows us to do trades without having to pay for anything, and that's great. And I think they do a great job of creating a board that is reasonable and realistic. You guys can tell judging off of the top prospects that you see in the middle of your screen right now. And so we're going to go ahead and get this draft started. Let's get these ads out of the way. All right. We have the number 1 overall pick. And there's one thing that I want to do before we get this thing started, okay? We're going to trade away Justin Fields, okay? We talked him up at the beginning of this offseason process, all the way here in January. We're down here in April now, and we're going to move on from him, okay? And the reason for it is I have a 3-year rule with these quarterbacks, and I just feel like by that 3rd year, you really know what you have in a guy. And I just don't feel like Justin Fields is ever going to hit that potential that a lot of people, including myself, thought that he would hit, okay? That Packers game was an opportunity for him to just light it up against a good team, and set the standard and create some momentum heading into the 2024 season. And they just fell flat on their ass. The offense did little to nothing, and you have to blame Justin Fields for that because he has been relatively productive for his standards in weeks prior. And so I was just very unimpressed with the way that the season finished and really just how his season looked overall. It was good in terms of the progression of Justin Fields, but it was not good when you compare it to all the other quarterbacks and the potential quarterbacks that you have in this draft. And so we are going to trade away Justin Fields, and the team that we're going to trade him away with is the Atlanta Falcons. The Atlanta Falcons are a team that desperately needs a quarterback. They're sitting here with the number 8 overall pick, and judging by the the draft positions that we have here with Washington and New England also desperately needing quarterbacks, they're not going to have an opportunity to get a premier guy like that. And so what we're going to do here is we are going to trade away Justin Fields. So let's see. We got to start the draft, of course. And then we got to trade him away. So what does trade compensation look like here for Justin Fields? You know what? I'm not sure what's going on here. Let me just keep talking up here. I think a second round pick is reasonable, right? He has done nothing that, screams, okay, we deserve to get a first round pick for this guy. I think this is very similar to like the Sam Darnold situation when he was shipped over from the Jets to the Carolina Panthers. And so, I don't know what train you guys are on at the current moment, but if I was the GM right here, I mean, this is what I would do. I don't want to take a chance with this experiment when you have 3 very good quarterbacks here on the board and you have the number 1 overall pick. It's your choice who you want to take here with this pick. So right here, I guess we had to refresh. I guess it was open for a little too long. We're going to go to the Falcons here. Oh, whoops. That's right. We need to add our player here. So we're going to add Justin Fields to the trade. And this is just going to be straight up, right? It's a rough estimate of what we want to do here. We're going to select the Falcons, and then we are going to take their number 2 overall pick. And right here we have a scale success rate. It says that they're very likely to accept this, so we will offer the trade to them. Right here, Justin Fields for the number 43 overall pick. It is accepted. It goes through. And now we have a second round pick, which we didn't have before. So we have 2 first round picks, a second round pick, and the 3rd overall pick. Now, the decision is, what do we do here with the number 1 overall pick, right? There was initially a lot of discussions about potentially trading it away and, accumulating more picks, rocking with Justin Fields. Look, like I said, I think the potential of these guys in this draft is going to exceed anything that we see from Justin Fields in the future. So what we're going to do here, right, and there are a lot of good quarterbacks. And we're going to reject these offers because these are unrealistic. Look, you're not going to draft a guy. Like he's right here on my screen, Jaden Daniels. You're not going to draft him because you're essentially just replacing Justin Fields with Justin Fields. But there is a guy in Caleb Williams that I think is absolutely fantastic. It's still really undetermined whether he wants to play for this team or not, but that is besides the point, because at this moment in time, there hasn't been any, real credible news saying that he doesn't want to play for the Bears. And so we're going to go ahead here and take Caleb Williams. Look, I just think that he has a lot of natural abilities, a lot of natural characteristics that are hard to find in any quarterback prospect. This is not just a shot at Justin Fields. This guy has arm talent that is off the charts, accuracy, improvisational skills, and just the ability to extend plays and just make magic happen, right? There are times where he does a little bit too much, but more often than not, he's going to take care of the football, still push it down the field, and just be super effective. I mean, what he's going to do for this offense with DJ Moore is going to be absolutely absurd. So we are going to go ahead here and take Caleb Williams with the 1st overall pick. Again, we're going to just reject all these offers here. Okay, interesting enough, they take Drake May, and I don't think that happens there considering that they just got Justin Fields, but you guys get the point. Okay, now, right here, what do we want to do here with the number 9 overall pick? Well, how did this happen? Okay, so Washington decided to go with Brock Bowers. That would be interesting. And then the Patriots went with Harrison. So two teams that I was very confident would take quarterbacks ended up taking two, what you would consider generational skill position players in Harrison and Bowers. And that's not an overstatement or an exaggeration. So it could happen. But okay, that's interesting. Okay. Now we move on here. There's a lot of depth at wide receiver, but Rome Odunze is a very, very fantastic player. I mean, if you have Caleb Williams throwing to DJ Moore and Rome Odunze, you're getting me excited now. But there isn't a ton of depth at the edge rusher spot in comparison to the wide receiver. Like, I think we can get a really good wide receiver at the 43rd overall pick, just considering how much depth there is. I mean, look at this. Odunze, Brian Thomas, very underrated. He's overshadowed by Malik Neighbors. Highly productive this year at LSU. Keon Coleman, I think, is a physical freak. Troy Franklin, #1 target at Oregon. Ikbuka's returning to Ohio State, so we'll disregard that. McConkey is one of the best slots. Adonai Mitchell, very clutch player. Xavier Legette, very good at run after the catch. So there's a lot of good players down the board, and I just don't think that it's necessary to get another wide receiver here when we already have DJ Moore. Like, we can settle for a guy with that 43rd overall pick. So we're going to take an edge rusher right here. A lot of good guys on the board here. I don't want to take Jared Verse just because I still think that there's a lot of fine-tuning that he still needs to have done in his game. And then Braylon Trice, I think, needs to become more consistent in a sense. And so what we're going to go ahead and do here is take Laiatu Latu from UCLA. Highly productive player in the pressures category, in the QB hits, in the sacks. And also does a great job dropping him back into coverage. So this is a very, very versatile player. You can use him in so many ways. And like we said, we got an insurance policy guy in Dante Fowler, right, for $3 million, just in case we didn't get that edge rusher. But we're sitting here at 9. We can still get that edge rusher, and that's exactly what we're going to do. So we kick off this draft, right, getting our franchise quarterback in Caleb Williams. And then we go ahead and follow that up and get another edge rusher to complement Montez Sweat and Christian Wilkins now here with Laiatu Latu. Now we move on here to the number 43 overall pick, and okay, just as we anticipated, all of the wide receivers are still here. So now it's just a matter of who we want, right? Troy Franklin, extremely productive receiver out of Oregon. Anytime you take a player out of a scheme like that is very heavy RPO based, wide receiver and quarterback friendly, it's hard to evaluate those guys. And so we got to think about that. I don't think we want to get a pure slot guy in McConkey. Mitchell would be very interesting. Even Xavier Worthy, I think, would also be someone that we want to consider here. This is tough, man. This is tough. Troy Franklin, I think, is very, very good as well, despite all of the things that I just said. And I do think we seriously need to get another wide receiver here because, we have DJ Moore and then this rookie to complement him. A lot of weight off the shoulder is not coming in immediately as the wide receiver 1. I think what we're going to do here is take Troy Franklin. And two guys that I was really considering was Adonai Mitchell and Xavier Worthy. I love the Texas wide receivers, but we are going to go with Troy Franklin here with the number 43 overall pick. And so we continue to add skill position players to help out Caleb Williams in his first year. That is interesting. We're here with the 3rd pick, and Jalen Polk is here. That maybe we could have waited another round. I mean, that's just how much depth is at this, at this position here. Now, there are a couple of names here that I really like, right? I mean, Kalen King had an underwhelming season, considering the talent that he has. So that could be a huge reason why he drops here in the 3rd round. Josh Newton, I think, is a really, really solid TCU cornerback here. I don't know. I mean, there's some good names around here. Do we want to... look, we talked about this, right? We just signed back Jalen Johnson, and we have 2 young guys who, we want to make sure that they get snaps in Kyler Gordon and Tyreek Stevenson. And so I don't want to add another player into that room to make it too crowded, forcing guys to get reps. There's just not enough space to get all these guys on the field. What I do think is interesting, though, is Rod Moore here from Michigan. Now, here's the thing. Obviously, you have 2 solidified safeties in Eddie Jackson and Jaquan Brisker. However, Jackson's getting up there in age, 31 years old. His contract expires after next season. Brisker, you don't have to worry about too much, but at least for now, you could potentially have Rod Moore play as a slot, a nickel, just have him in some versatile role. Maybe just add a third deep safety in certain packages. And then this could be the successor ultimately for Eddie Jackson. So I think that this could be a very interesting piece that you could add to this team. And it also looks towards the long term as well. And it's not like you're making a huge sacrifice here, taking him in the 3rd round, right? This is a day 2 pick that you think has a ton of potential. And so for those reasons, I think that this would make the most sense. And that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to take Rod Moore here out of Michigan, and that finishes up our entire offseason. So let's talk about this now, right? Obviously, the big move being we don't keep Justin Fields. You guys let me know how you guys feel about that in the comment section below. But I'm going to change this right here as I'm writing this so we can get the overall roster done. Caleb Williams, obviously quarterback 1 now. Still have Herbert and Johnson as our 2 running backs. Wide receivers, we have DJ Moore. Wide receiver 2 now is going to be Troy Franklin. And then our wide receiver 3 between Tyler Scott and maybe even Velus Jones. We didn't really talk about him too much. Okay. And then we have Cole Kmet here as our tight end. Our offensive line goes Braxton Jones, Tevin Jenkins, Connor Williams, Nate Davis, Darnell Wright. I don't see a hole in this offense. I really don't. And then we take a look at the edge rusher spot. Montez Sweat, Christian Wilkins, Andrew Billings, maybe Gravon Dexter. And then you add Laiatu Latu to that other edge rusher spot. So this defensive line looks a lot different compared to the start of the 2023 season. Edmonds, Edwards, and Sanborn make up the linebacker group. Johnson, Gordon, and Stevenson make up the secondary, as well as Eddie Jackson and Jaquan Brisker. So that is our offseason rundown here for the Chicago Bears. Let me know what you guys think about how I did overall for this group as the GM of the Chicago Bears. If you guys enjoyed this video, consider hitting that subscribe button. We will have normal, just mock draft videos designated to certain teams as the offseason rolls along, but it is fun to do an entire overview of what the offseason could look like here for every team. This is our edition of that with the Chicago Bears. Again, most importantly, don't forget to subscribe, and until then, I will see you guys all later. Peace.